Hari Sharanam. In the previous episode, we briefly reviewed the puritanical, strict birth-based caste system of the Hindu faith. Now we will proceed further. But before we proceed further, let's understand that to appreciate the dynamic nature of the Hindu faith called Sanatana Dharma, we can begin with three analogies. The first analogy is that of a well as a water source. A well has not only well-defined boundaries, the boundaries are non-expandable because the faith is established under the directions of one person and confined to very strict, inflexible doctrines. There is a faith of that kind today in the world. The other analogy is that of a pond or a lake, which has also well-defined boundaries, but they are more or less a little flexible. In the rains, they expand a little and then shrink back to their limits when the rains are off. The third water source analogy is a river, the boundaries of which are not precisely defined. A river is a flowing source of water which keeps changing its routes slightly here and there on its course towards the ocean. The Hindu faith is akin to a river. It began with the Vedic faith or the Vedic religion initially, which remained dominant or predominant for ages, for millennia. It had its own character, some of which we saw in the previous episodes, and it had its own puritanical caste system. But with the advent of Puranas, which had beautiful personalities of the deities, captivating personalities of the deities, and wonderful, attractive stories full of inspiration and knowledge in many ways, people started getting attracted towards the Puranas. Therefore, the Vedic faith started shrinking to a small stream, and ever since it has remained a significant part of the Hindu faith, but the followers have always kept declining, and today it's a very small stream flowing alongside the Puranic faith in India, with very few real adherents to the puritanical Vedic culture. The nature of Sanatana Dharma's dynamism and ever-evolving nature is that it is not founded by one person, and it has no one single text to guide the life of its followers. It encompasses a multitude of texts. When we talk of the Puranic faith, again, in the Puranic faith, there are too many Puranas, not one. 18 of them, the principal ones, said to have been authored by Vedavyas himself, with lot many interpolations here and there along the course of history. And when we talk of the Puranic faith, which became the predominant faith after the Vedic faith shrunk to a small stream, when we talk of this Puranic faith, we also include in that the story-oriented, what they call historical texts like Ramayana and Mahabharata. The two together we are calling, for the sake of convenience, the Puranic faith. Now, Puranic faith had its own character, distinct from the Vedic faith. The Puranas respected the Vedas, yes, always, but they also started critiquing its utility and rituals. If we take the most representative Purana, which is the most respected of all Puranas, the Bhagavad Purana, authored by Vedavyas, then we find that the Bhagavad Purana, in its own very polite way, starts questioning, first of all, the basic thesis that the Vedas and their caste system both are without a beginning, and they exist since the creation began. Now, this can be found in the 9th canto or 9th skandha of Bhagavad Purana, 14th chapter, which clearly mentions that in the Satya Yuga, which is the first yuga of the 4 yugas cycle, there were no Vedas and there were no castes or Varnas. There was only one Varna or caste, that was Hansa, which means that everybody was spiritually enlightened. So, this refutation of the fundamental thesis of the Vedas and the caste system being without a beginning does not come in too many words. But this refutation is significant. It shows a new path, that Vedas were created by somebody at some time, and the caste system was created by somebody at some time. The matter doesn't stop at that. The Bhagavad Purana does not stop at that. In the 6th canto, or the 6th skanda of the Bhagavad Purana, we find an interesting story of Balaram and Romaharshan. The story goes like this. The Brahmins, the rishis, who were not only Brahmins by birth, by the way, but also by character and karma or actions, occupation, regular Brahmins, genuine Brahmins, they were very fond of a person called Romaharshan, who was a very good storyteller of spiritual stories, of course. And they always wanted to hear some stories from him, so they requested Romaharshan to speak to them, narrate to them some stories containing spiritual knowledge. So he was asked to place himself on the raised platform called Vyasapit, which is a tradition here to honor people who impart knowledge, to make them sit on a high podium and speak from there. That is the Vyasapit. And they themselves sat on the ground. That is also a tradition, to sit below the Vyasapit. This was noble for them. This man called Romaharshan was not a Brahmin. Actually, he was a hybrid caste called Sud, born of a Kshatriya father and a Brahmin mother. Now, as I said earlier, the people who are Varna Sankaras, born of two different castes, they are not in the Varna tradition of the Vedas. They are outcasts. They find a place in no Varna. Varnas are only four: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. So they are placed ideally even below the Shudras, because they are outcasts. So the man was an outcast. He was Sud by birth, but by nature, by character and by occupation and action, he was a Brahmin, though not by birth. So this was noble, as appears from the story. Incidentally, the elder brother of Krishna, the great Lord Krishna, who spoke the Bhagavad Gita, an incarnation of God, his elder brother, imagine, he comes there and finds that the Brahmins are sitting below that Sutaji or Romaharshan. He became very angry. And he was in any case an angry person, but in that fit of anger, he used a blade of grass to strike at Romaharshan. The intention probably was not of killing, because throwing a blade of grass at somebody doesn't kill anybody usually, but in that instance, the man died instantly. Balaram was so powerful. Now that he died instantly, the Brahmins became enraged. They rebuked Balaram and accused him of Brahma Hatya, the highest sin in Sanatana Dharma, Vedic Dharma. Killing a Brahmin was the highest sin. Even kings can't kill the Brahmins. They told Balaram that the person he had killed was actually a Brahmin, by character, by nature and by actions. So the sin incurred by Balaram was that to be incurred as if he had killed a Brahmin. Therefore, he must face the punishment of killing a Brahmin, and if he wants relief, he should undertake suitable penance. Now, what was the punishment for penance? The Brahmin suggested that he must decide himself. They gave the options also. So Balaram accepted the guilt and he decided to opt for penance by going on a countrywide pilgrimage on foot immediately. So this punishment was accepted by Balaram. This is a small story, but it has a big message of the changing nature of the caste system, of the Varna Vyavastha, of the dynamic nature of Hinduism. It was unimaginable in the Vedic period, at least of that Vedic period when the traditions have become encrusted, firmed up. So this change from strictly birth-based Varna system or caste system to a character-based and action-based Varna system is very much in evidence here in the Puranic period, even though it continued. Please remember that the great Karna of the Mahabharata war, Mahabharata times, who was brought up by a Sut family, same Sut family, born of a Kshatriya father and a Brahmin mother. He faced humiliation throughout his life just because being born in a Sut family, even though he was as good a warrior and archer as Arjuna, or probably better, some people say. But because he was not born a Kshatriya in the perception of the people, he was humiliated always. Whichever denomination of Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma one belongs to, whichever sect one belongs to, if they are asked to choose two persons from the history of Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism who can be taken as the ideal persons, they all will name only two, principally Lord Rama, the incarnation of God, and Lord Krishna, the incarnation of God again. Prince Rama was banished for 14 years by his stepmother, and on his way to the forest he met one Nishad Raj. Nishad Raj means the king or the leader of the Nishad caste people. Tulsidas says about the Nishad caste, Lok Ved Dui Bhanti Hi Nicha, Jasi Chah Chui Leiya Sicha, which means that according to the Vedas and according to the popular perception, the Nishads were a very lowly caste, and if their shadow fell upon somebody of a higher caste, he would be obliged to take a bath to restore his purity. But look at how Prince Rama met him. He not only called and made him sit near him, but also physically embraced him. Bete Ram Bhadra Bhari Bahu, says Tulsidas. So now tell us, by pure common sense, we shall follow the rishis and munis and the Vedic injunctions, or we shall follow this great icon of Hinduism, who is revered, respected, and loved by all denominations of Hinduism. So this transition is significant, and this is the transition that finally culminated into the Bhagavad Gita's philosophical explanation of the Varna system of the Sanatana Dharma, as based not on birth but on nature, guna, karma, action, and swabhava, that is character. Having thus completed our journey from the Vedas to the Puranas in respect of the caste system or Varna Vyavastha of the Sanatana faith, we now move to the next step, which is the concept of Varna in the Bhagavad Gita. Till then, Hari Sharanam.